And now I'm the one who's stuck writing this horse romance that I did not particularly want to write. Oh yeah, with sleep math. 6.5 hours is still pretty good. I mean, that's almost 7 hours of sleep. That's good.
So we're both really awkward. So we're going to try not to be awkward.
If I read a book and she was over 26, I was a little bit like, honey, clock's ticking. You got to find the guy. People don't talk about my dogs changing into human work enough. And it always, kind of offends me a little bit. I'd almost rather write the fucking book than pitch it. Do you know what I mean? I want you to want it, but in a week so that I have time to fit. So I was, writing my little stories about dogs who could change into humans. So it was very magical. That was literally the whole plot, was just that the dogs change into humans and then back into dogs. That was the whole story. Ground floor of the shapeshifter romance, I think,
I really think you had something there.
Hi, we pinned you to be the main because you were the main star of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Preface, we're both really awkward, so we're going to try not to be awkward. We haven't interviewed in a while, but we're so excited you're here. Thank you so much. We loved your books. I have actually I went through all the books that you've written that I haven't read this past month. So I've read 3 of your books just back to back. So I'm a huge fan. So excited to have you here.
Well, thank you.
Today, we are joined by none other than Alicia Thompson, USA Today bestselling author. You publish with Penguin Random House and Berkeley as a contemporary romance author, best known for emotionally grounded love stories with humor. And in your most recent novel, a little bit of Irish luck. So to kick things off, we thought we would have you tell us a little bit about yourself, or I guess tell the audience about yourself, kind of what you care about and why they're going to want to read all your books, but maybe specifically your newest in every possible way.
Yeah. I'm Alicia Thompson, as you said. I write romance. I love romance. I've loved romance since I was too young to read it. I was reading my mom's Harlequins when I was 12 years old. That's kind of how I got started. And then in high school, actually, I tried to write my own Harlequins. So I actually wrote 3 and I sent them off to Harlequin and everything. I put them in the mail and I, tried to see if they would be interested in them. Never did get any of those picked up, but from high school, I was kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do. And then as far as my latest book, it's called In Every Possible Way. It's got a magical speculative kind of element to it. The whole thing is that this woman, Jess, is celebrating her 37th birthday, and she goes on this really, really bad date, which of course she's hoping will be a really good date and a really, wonderful birthday story, but it does not end up that way. And he's just kind of an asshole. And then unfortunately, when she's in the parking lot after the date, she ends up getting mugged and she falls and hits her head. And then when she wakes up, she's in Ireland. So that's where the kind of magical part comes in, because it's why is she in Ireland? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. And then after that, it's a bit of I like to think of it as a Before Sunrise-esque story where it's kind of, takes place in a very short amount of time. And it's her in a foreign city with, somebody who's kind of acting as her guide through the city, Eamon. And so he walks around and they, visit sites in Dublin, and then they go to, the other coast of Ireland and just kind of hang out. And magical and romantic times are had.
Yeah, I will say, as someone who is 30 and single, I appreciated reading about a 37-year-old single woman who is looking for love, because a lot of times, or at least I was kind of brainwashed into thinking I would be married with a house and kids by 25.
Well, it's so funny. It's so funny, thinking about those Harlequins I used to read. And now, granted, I was a teenager when I was reading these, so cut me some slack on it. But it's funny that I really thought, if I read a book and she was over 26, I was a little bit like, honey, clock's ticking. You got to find the guy.
I'm 27 years old. I've no money and no prospects. I'm already a burden to my parents. And I'm frightened.
There's got to be time for you to because you've got to be with him for a couple of years, and then you got to get married. Then you have a couple of years, then you have a kid. You got to get going. And again, I was 15. I didn't know any better, but it's just so funny because obviously when you actually grow up and you're an adult, you're it's not that way at all. You've got time, but at the same time, obviously hoping to meet, your special someone who you can share your life with.
Definitely. No, definitely. That's crazy. You were writing from 12 years old. So that was 12 your first time writing, or were you trying to write before that as well?
I mean, I wrote technically my first stuff when I was in first grade, and it was the classic, a composition book just filled with, I was an artist as well. I was an author illustrator. So I was, writing my little stories it was about like dogs who could change into humans. So it was very magical. Yeah, that was literally the whole plot, was just like that the dogs change into humans and then back into dogs. That was the whole story.
Yeah. The magical realism is really special, I think, in romance books. I've been seeing it more and more. So it's good to know that you kind of have roots in that from your
Yeah,
dog to human
absolutely.
days.
Yeah, it goes all the way back. And I don't know if I'll ever bring dog to human into my romance space, but
Hey,
Who
never say
knows?
never.
yeah.
So I guess going back to being a writer, you've obviously wanted to be it for a really long time. When was the first moment that it really hit you? Like, I am doing this as like a career, like I'm a writer. Was it a specific moment or did it like sneak up on you?
I think probably there's been like several moments. Like I think it kind of keeps happening. Like every time there's something, new that happens, either just like a really exciting opportunity you never thought you'd get, or you come out with, another book, or it just hits you sometimes in different ways. But I know when I was a kid, I won like this young authors contest, which is just one of those, kind of silly things. They pick a couple kids out of the school and then you get to go to this big, like there was an author who came and spoke to us. He wrote Stone Fox or something like that. I still remember, like I can see the cover of the book that he wrote in my memory. But and that was even in like fourth grade or so. That was definitely a time when I was like, oh, this is like a real thing that people do. People write stories, and maybe I could do that because I really like writing stories as well. So I think from a pretty young age, I had the idea that like this is a valid career and it's something that I really want to try for. But then obviously it meant a lot to me, like when I, got my first agent or I got my first book deal, or it was like, okay, this is really happening.
Yeah. Kayla and I definitely talk about dabbling in writing, and I think it's a bit of a pipe dream for us, but we love talking to other authors and hearing how they came about it. And kind of, I think this was Love in the Time of Serial Killers. That was your first published work officially, I believe. Is that correct?
No, actually, that's
No?
my first romance, but I published a YA novel back in 2009. So I have a whole like first iteration of my
Yeah.
career that kind of happened back then. And then, I mean, this is getting into the weeds, I know, but that's another thing I think about the writing career that nobody tells you or that you just don't realize is that, to me, I thought it was the kind of thing where it's like once you jump on the train, then you're on it. So like once you get published, then it's like obviously they're just going to keep publishing you. And I mean, that's just how it's going to go. And it's not. And so I had kind of this first wave of my career where I published that and a couple like children's books. And then I had a really long time where I was still writing, but just nothing was getting sold, or, I was still trying to figure out like where I wanted to go next. And so, yeah, I've been doing this for quite a while.
So I guess
Wow.
that's actually a great segue into the next question, because you can maybe compare it to either your YA days or your first romance if you want. But we kind of wanted you to think about your earlier works, maybe even as far back as Dogs Becoming Humans and Humans Becoming Dogs, and versus what you're writing now, and kind of like what's changed in your writing style, your approach, like what's important to you as a storyteller, and how has that evolved over time?
Mm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I really appreciate that you're validating my early work. People don't talk about my dogs changing into human work enough. And it always, kind of offends me a little bit that they forget about that stage of my career. I don't know. I think one thing I've been kind of realizing lately the last few years is I think that I'm getting a lot more ambitious as a writer, and like just wanting to like challenge myself to different things in a way that I think is really cool, because if I hadn't had some of the career experiences that I've had, then I think I'd be writing a certain kind of story, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that I'm starting to kind of like look at just other genres or other, seeing kind of what other people are doing now and getting more ideas for like ways I want to stretch myself or challenge myself to write something a little different. So I definitely think that there's a core to all of my work that's kind of the same, but I can see ways that I'm like thinking about how to expand it a little bit.
Oh, that's so awesome. So I guess you talked about kind of your inspiration for more, but I guess do you have any favorite writers or your favorite genre you like to read? You talked about reading romance at a very young age, and I also was there with you reading romance way too young. But besides romance, do you like reading any other genres, and do you have any other favorite writers?
Yeah, so many. I always like to say I read promiscuously because I'll read almost anything. Like pretty much if you put it in front of me, I'll read it. I really love reading things on people's recommendations. So like even if, say science fiction isn't my normal go-to genre, but my husband really likes it and he knows the kind of things that I like. So he'll sometimes say like, I think you'd really like this. It's very character forward. It's very like all the things that you would like. He always warns me if there's not romance in it, though. He's always like, I'm sorry, there's not really any romance in this one, which I do appreciate the heads up about. In romance, I mean, some of my favorite authors writing now are like Kate Claiborne. I just love her. Regina Black is another one that I really love. August Lane was like one of my favorite books of all time. Just like a lot of really good romance authors out there. Anita Kelly always writes with such emotion and such heart. I always love their books. And then I read a lot of nonfiction. I I read a lot of God, what's his name now? I'm blanking on it. Adam Higginbotham. Like his Midnight at Chernobyl. I think I've read that book like 8 times. I'm really obsessed with that. Or the book Say Nothing that they then made into a TV show about the IRA and like Ireland and the Troubles and all that stuff. I'm obsessed with that kind of thing. I read a lot of books about Ireland for this novel to write it. And I read a lot of books by Irish authors. So I read like a lot of Sally Rooney, a lot of like Claire Keegan, a lot of some names I can't pronounce, so I'm not going to try, but I did read them. So yeah, I always have a lot of fun reading kind of like for my books too, like research or, stuff that's in that same vein.
Did you go to Ireland while you're writing this book? I feel like I've been to Ireland once on a tour. So I did like the whole country, and I feel like your descriptions were really good, especially of Dublin. Like I remember I think you were about the Temple Bar, and I was like, oh, I remember being there. Like your descriptions were great. So did you go on the eyes on the ground or?
Yeah, so when I wrote it, when I started writing it, I didn't even have a passport. So I actually applied for my passport like while I was writing it because I was like, I really should get this. I really would like to travel more. And then I wrote the book and I just did a lot of research. Like I watched a lot of videos. For example, actually it's funny because, at the end of the year, YouTube will give you your kind of like Spotify Wraps. They'll give you like your YouTube Wrapped. My YouTube was all Ireland travel videos, how to fix a boiler, which comes up in the book. So you can see I was researching that. It was all stuff that was like very connected to this book in a way that was really funny. It was like, oh, you love home improvement and you love travel. And I was like, not really, but just for this book, I was
so
watching
funny.
a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's funny because I watched so many videos that there were some things that when I did finally go to Ireland, I was like, oh my God, I got this exactly right. Like, how did I even know? And it's because you watched like hours and hours and hours of people walking through St. Stephen's Green. That's how you knew about that, But it was really cool. After I finished the first draft, I went with a friend to Ireland for my birthday, which also, because I'm very nerdy, it happens to be the weekend that the book takes place, like the exact
That's
weekend.
cool.
So like that, like March 15th was a Saturday. That's my birthday. Jess's birthday is the night before. So March 14th. So March 15th, March 16th, and then March 17th is like that St. Patrick's Day. So I went to Dublin on that day and we like basically did every single thing that I talk about in the book, as far as like we went to the restaurant, then we went to the church, and then we went to the park, and then, and I was kind of like timing it out and figuring out like, okay, does this all make sense? Does this all work? Could they go to all these places in one day? It was really fun.
No, it was a long day for Jess, and I also think I'm pronouncing Edmund's name wrong. How did you pronounce it?
Eamon. It's Eamon.
Eamon. I'm so bad with book of pronunciations with names.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually going to tell you, one of the things I did appreciate was that you put in a way to remember it. You had Jess say, oh, it's like Damon, but without the D. And then he said something like, I don't know. It was really funny and it gave me a chuckle. So anytime I got to his name, I was like, Damon, Eamon, it's Eamon. And that's how I remembered it.
Yeah, no, I did that very deliberately. So I'm glad you caught that because, so like with one of my books, for example, the main character's name was Asa. And that was actually a name of my older brother's like best friend growing up. And I always thought it was a really cool name. I just always really liked it. So I put it in the book, and it wasn't until I started talking about the book with people or like hearing a book club or talk about it or whatever that I realized that like not everybody knows how to pronounce that name. To me, it wasn't that unusual of a name, I guess, because I had just heard it growing up. So with this one, I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to put a little pronunciation guide in the book so that, hopefully that will help a little bit.
Yeah. Now, as a reader, I definitely appreciated it. And it also sounds like you've given us an itinerary for Dublin if we ever go, because you've walked it. It's possible, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. No, you could take this exact trip. And it is a lot of touristy spots. Like it's like hitting the highlights. You're going to see the Molly Malone statue. You're going to see, St. Patrick's Cathedral. But I kind of very deliberately wanted to take her on a pretty touristy trip. That's kind of the point.
Yeah. No, that's great. So it sounds like a lot of research goes into writing even something like a romance book, which we were just at BookCon and we kind of hit on some author panels where they talk about how they had to make up a whole category called romantasy when female writers started being recognized in the fantasy world. So, a lot of people kind of make fun of romance, which is obviously ridiculous. Kayla and I are big romance readers, so obviously ridiculous. And it sounds like a lot of research goes into writing a romance book. From what I learned this past weekend, a lot of research goes into writing every book, which I had no idea. So I'd love for you to walk us through kind of a typical writing day for you. Like, are you a morning person, night owl? Do you just write when the inspiration, like, are you in the shower like Taylor Swift and all of a sudden you have to pull out a notebook and write something down because inspiration just hit you? And then how do you balance the research moments too, especially when you get to fixing something mechanical that you may have no idea about, but your main guy has to know how to do?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm just going to touch on, because you kind of like hit on a bit of a soapbox of mine, but I hate it when people denigrate romance for, I don't know, not being as thoughtful or not. Because to me, a lot of the romance books that I read anyway are some of the most thoughtful books that I've ever read. And they have a lot of deep character work and a lot of kind of stuff going on. And I always kind of say that, I mean, any genre can have bad books and good books. I mean, there are genres where you might think that like sci-fi is more researched maybe, but not always. I mean, I've read some bad sci-fi. So anyway, that's just something that I always kind of think about, is that people sometimes assume that like somehow not as much work goes into these books just because they read easy. I think people think when they read easy that must mean that they're easy to write. And sometimes it's like that's actually really challenging to get a book to read easy like that. Anyway, now I've gotten off track already, but my typical writing day, I would say, so right now I currently write full time. So the good news is I have more open time to do it. So I can do a lot more writing during the day and stuff like that. I used to do it, all after work. I do tend to be a bit more of a night person. So like I always I have this idea in my head that I should start writing in the morning. And I like, in theory, I love that, because it's like you get all your words done and then you don't have the whole day on you, before you're like getting down to work. Functionally though, I often do write kind of like after lunch, at least, because the morning is just kind of not my time. It's hard for me to focus on stuff as much. I do a lot more admin kind of stuff in the morning. I definitely I set a lot of goals for myself. So I do a lot of I'm trying to write 2,000 words today, or I'm trying to write for, 2 hours straight. Or so I do a lot of all I ever do. I was just telling my husband the other day, I was like, I'm back drafting a manuscript because I'm doing a lot of math, because all I do is kind of well, if I write 2,000 words today, then that means I'm up to 5,000. But well, if I don't get to 2,000, then I'll write 2,500 tomorrow. But then I'll, and I'm always doing all this math to try to figure out you know, what goals can I hit. My notebooks become they're nothing but writing schedule after writing schedule. Cause I'll create one and I'll be like, this is the one, this is exactly how I'm going to, finish this book. And then within 2 days, I've already messed it up because I've already skipped a day, or I didn't write as much as I wanted to, or, whatever. And then I'm writing a whole new schedule and I'm like, this is the one for sure. Definitely this time. And then the research, I mean, it's easy to get bogged down in the research because it's so fun that sometimes it's you just kind of want to watch videos about Ireland for, 2 hours and be like, I did my writing today, even though you didn't actually, put a single word down. It's always funny to me, the things that require research. Sometimes there are things like the boiler, I brought that up, but I can't even get into it. It would be too boring to you. But originally it was a furnace, actually. So I wrote a whole scene where he fixes a furnace. So I did all this research on furnaces and how to fix a furnace, all this stuff. Then I actually had an Irish sensitivity reader for the book to read it and just make sure that I'm getting the dialogue, right, the vocabulary, that, I'm not saying anything culturally that wouldn't fit or whatever. And she had a lot of very helpful notes. And one of them was, she was like, we really don't have furnaces here. And I was like, oh, that's a problem. I'm a Florida girl. We don't have furnaces. We don't have boilers. I don't have any of this. So honestly, all of this was kind of new to me. So then I had to go and I had to research boilers because I had to change it to that. And so it's I never would have thought that would have been such an ordeal to research, but it turns out that was one of the things that I was working a lot. Or even when you're writing, sometimes all of a sudden you're like, wow, I actually don't know as many words as I thought I did. You're trying to describe what a building looks like. And you're like, is that a gable? Is that a spire? Is that a, what is that? You're looking at this picture of this building and you're like, I'm trying to describe it in the book, but I don't even know what you call that. Or what kind of stone is that? I don't want to say a limestone building or granite building and it's not, but you kind of don't even know the things you don't know until you're writing. And then all of a sudden you kind of realize the limits on what you are actually know the vocabulary for.
Yeah.
So you not only did research on boilers, you also researched furnace. So you can, if you had one, you could fix both now.
I low-key feel like I could. I actually feel like I could help you troubleshoot quite a few furnace problems at this point. I really do.
That's
Up
so
here in
funny.
New York. So I think, I don't actually know what we have. I have no idea, but I might have to ask you how to fix it one day.
Yeah.
I figured you were from Florida because every single book, doesn't it loosely, like, it comes, like, she come back to Florida. She's from Florida.
Mhm.
All your main characters somehow end up in Florida at some point, right?
I think I was gonna say only the baseball book because that one's set in South Carolina.
Yes,
But I
yes,
mean,
you're
they
right.
spring train in Florida, so there's still
You're
kind of a
right.
connection.
I forgot that. I just knew it was South, and I was like, "Oh, Florida." But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. It
Yeah.
was South Carolina. Or yes. Is there a scene that you've written that has like hit it, like has taken a piece of you, or like you feel like you've like put a huge piece of yourself into it that was just really hard to write? That's you feel very close to.
I mean, honestly, there's a lot of scenes. Like, there's a lot of scenes. Like, I definitely put quite a lot into things. And even like if I write, say, a third act breakup, I usually get very emotional about that scene. Like, it really, like, I've definitely cried before, like, writing some of that dialogue or, just kind of getting in the characters' heads about that. And then there's definitely things that are just very personal. There was actually a whole thing, and I cut it out. I didn't end up leaving it in. There was a whole part in the baseball book where when they were just chatting back and forth, I had her like just tell this story about something that happened when she was a kid or whatever. And it was basically, it was like exactly something that I had like been through. It wasn't super traumatic. It was just a moment where like you kind of feel like you fucked up and you felt bad about it or whatever. And honestly, it was so emotional. Like I was like crying while I was writing that. And then later I ended up cutting it because it didn't really need to be in there. And it kind of bogged the conversation down. But it was definitely one of those things where I was like, man, I did not realize that I thought about that as much as I apparently do, or that I still had all those emotions around it.
I feel like writing in a way is like it's not equivalent to therapy, but I feel like it's so therapeutic where you can put those emotions on the page. You don't even realize it, and you can like almost see it in a third person. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that like you tell on yourself in your books, and there's always things that sometimes like you don't even know. And so you write this whole book and it's like about like I'll just talk about baseball book again, but like that whole book is a lot about him as a baseball player kind of white knuckling it through his life and trying to kind of get through all this stuff and not deal with it. And part of the book, his challenge is kind of learning to deal with it. And it was definitely one of those things where when I was done with it, I was like, some of this shit is stuff that you could really take like for yourself. Like some of this is stuff you need to be telling yourself more. And so I always think that with books that a lot of your own stuff ends up coming out, whether you know it or not.
Are you someone who plots ahead, or are you just see where the story takes you?
It's kind of a mix of both where I usually have a pretty good idea for especially like the high level like milestones. So I kind of know, like what the meet cute's going to look like. I kind of know what maybe like their first, hookup is going to look like. I know what their third act breakup might look like. So I usually know those kind of main points. And then as I write, I am kind of figuring out how to get from place to place. But like I always say that I don't outline, and then I kind of feel almost like a cheat or a liar for saying that, because the truth is that I outline a lot in my head. Like I have a lot of stuff that I've thought about. A lot of times like my ideal way to write a book is I like to have thought about the book for like a year before I even sit down to write it. It doesn't always work out that way just because timing wise, if you're coming out with a book a year, sometimes you got to kind of, but like, you know, for example, the book that I think might be my next romance, like that I haven't drafted yet, that wouldn't come out for, 2 years. I already have a lot of it in my head. So I am kind of already outlining it, even if I haven't formalized it on a piece of paper,
Yeah, and just kind of going back to, putting a piece of yourself into it. Something I heard at BookCon was someone said, it was an author who said, it's a really weird mix to be an author because you kind of have this ego to think, oh, I have a story worth telling. But then you also have like super vulnerability and like, oh, but like, please be nice when you read it. Like, I'm super nervous because you are putting this piece of yourself into every single thing you write. And I know I often, as a reader, forget that it is this big emotional work by the author because as a reader, I can just sit down and read it in 8 hours, boom, done, move on. But you as the author have spent so much time crafting it and making it feel so seamless and, blood, sweat, tears, whatever. Plus, if you are putting in those vulnerable emotional stories pulled directly from parts of yourself you didn't even know you needed to say.
Yeah, it is a really weird thing because like one thing, for example, is it's weird. Like, say you write a character and she's a lot like you in a lot of ways, and then people are like, "This character's a bitch. Like, I don't like her at all," and you're like, "Whoops, uh-oh," And then there's other things where it's like I've definitely written, say, characters that I don't think are necessarily like me at all, but I feel so emotionally attached to them because I've lived with them for so long. Like I wrote the book and then I revised the book and then I edited it again and then I went back over it and so at some point, like hearing people's opinions about that character or whatever, sometimes they can still be hard to hear, even though like sometimes even I recognize I keep talking about the baseball book. I don't know why. It's just on my mind, I guess. But like people would say that Daphne was pretty messy, for example. And like she gets herself into some messes. I don't disagree with them. But at the same time, like I remember when I first read that in reviews, it kind of like, I don't know, I was almost like offended on her behalf. I was like, messy? It's like, I don't know. I think she's doing all right. Like I was getting kind of, you know, because it is, you're right. You put so much of yourself into it and you just put so much work into it.
Well, Daphne was very human. I mean, everyone's messy in their own way.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I felt, but yeah.
No, I love that book. I mean, I like all your books, but that one I thought was really good. I couldn't put it down.
Okay, so you have we've talked about kind of your writing style and pulling pieces of yourself, but what do you do when the words just aren't coming and your agent or the publisher or whoever is saying, "Hey, we got to churn this book out. Come on." And you just can't find the words to sit down and write it.
Mhm. Well, first of all, I will say that movies led me to believe that they would like actually show up on your doorstep or like call you or something. You know what I mean? Like in movies, they're always like calling a bunch and like you see they're like missing a call from their agent like 8 times. You're like, uh-oh, or you see them like actually show up and they're like, how many pages do you have? What can I read? I will say that like I was kind of not surprised, but it's not like that. So like if
Okay.
you're late on a deadline or something, your inbox is just silent and empty. And then, maybe a little bit later, they're like, hey, what's up? Not that I've ever been that late on a deadline, but I'm just saying it's not the same. They don't chase you down for it the way I thought that they did. They're also, frankly, it's a lot easier to just be like, hey, I'm kind of going through a lot right now. Can I have 2 extra weeks? And usually they're like, that's fine. It's not a big deal, which was something good to learn because I think when you first start out, you think that you can't ask for any extensions, like that your book deal will be like taken away from you if you do that. And that's not true. You can. If words really aren't coming, I would say, I mean, my first thing is I do try. It's like the worst writing advice that you've ever heard, but it's like the most important writing advice is the kind of like you just have to sit down and write. That truly is like the first step to getting the words out is if you're not sitting at your computer and actually putting your hands on the keyboard, then the words are not going to just magically appear on your page. So that's my first step is I usually try to get some writing done. Like I'll do like a little writing sprint or like set some kind of goal for myself. So I'll kind of say like, okay, you can write, if you just write for 20 minutes, then you can be done. Or if you just write 200 words, then you can be done. And usually it's like once you get started, you start getting in the flow of it. And then you're like, okay, I could do another sprint or okay, like I could keep, I wrote 400 words and I didn't even like realize it because I was just kind of on a roll. So that is really the hardest part is just the actual literal starting part. Then the other thing, if they're just really not coming, is sometimes I try to like refill the well in some kind of way as far as like, that's where like reading a book that's about something that you're writing about or watching a movie that's kind of in the same vein or like, for example, if I'm writing a scene that's really funny, then sometimes I'll try to watch like a comedy or something just to kind of try to get myself in that mindset of like, okay, can I get myself in that mindset of like jokes and banter and, all that? And maybe it'll help stuff to start flowing. Can you take a walk, and just like think about things? You mentioned Taylor Swift in the shower. I'm really bad. Like I don't have like a notebook or a whiteboard or anything, but like it is a great place to like think about stuff.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I don't know, I'll take a shower in the middle of the day just because it's like, well, I need a break from writing and this is a good place for me to like stop and really try to think through the scene. I think a lot about scenes like when I'm trying to go to bed at night, which isn't great for sleep, so I don't necessarily recommend it, but like I'll be turning them over in my head trying to figure out like, okay, like what can that character do? I read this book a while ago and I wish I could remember the author or anything, so I apologize. Maybe I'll look it up and like tell you guys later. But it was basically one of those books that was like how to write faster. And it was kind of one of those like very clickbaity, here's how I went from 1,000 to 10,000 words and, whatever. And one thing that was very helpful to me that I remember her saying in the book is that she said that you needed a couple things before you sat down to like write a scene. And one of those things is you have to know what's going to happen in that scene. And that sounds so obvious, but so many times, because I am a little bit of a pantser where I just like to kind of sit down and like just kind of see where it takes me. So many times it's true that like I'm sitting down in front of my computer and I'm trying to like write the words, but I'm also trying to figure out what's even happening. And I don't know that yet. And that is where I often get kind of stuck. So like one thing I do now is I keep a writing notebook and I like write down all these like reflections about what I've written. I write down all these notes about like what's coming up next. I write down like a favorite quote from that section that I just wrote. I give myself little stickers. And that's like, it's just a nice way to keep track of everything and also to help keep me motivated. And so like in my notes, for example, I'm writing like, okay, after this scene, what next? What next? Should she argue with this person? Should she, well, we already had a scene in a restaurant, so I don't want to go back to a restaurant. Should I maybe have it take place in a park? Like I'm writing all these notes to myself. So I'm kind of like helping to almost like set myself up for the next day. You know, like I've done my job today, but I have to make sure that when I sit down at the computer tomorrow, it's not like brand new, fresh, you know?
Yes. Now that's really good writing advice.
Definitely. Do you ever like lay in bed and you're thinking and then you like have to pop up and write because like you figured it out what you've been like stressed about? Or
I'll be honest, I don't know if this is good or bad. Like I don't know if this means I have like really good sleep hygiene or sleep habits, or if it's just really bad because I should do that, but I don't really do that. And I don't get up and like doom scroll either. Like you hear people talk about that where they're like, "Oh, I go to bed," or then like, and either like I get a really good idea so I pop back up and I like start writing, or I just can't go to sleep so I pick up my phone and I start doing stuff. I lay down and I go to sleep. I go to bed. I don't fall asleep for a long time. Like it always takes me a very long time to fall asleep, but I will just lay there in that bed. Like I don't do anything. I just lay there and I just think about things, and I think about like, man, it'd be really nice if you fell asleep. You're going to have to wake up early tomorrow. You're only cutting yourself short. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's good, but for better or worse, I don't really get back up out of bed once I'm in bed.
That's where the math starts happening for me, is when I lay down to sleep and I'm like, all right, if you fall asleep now, you can get 7 hours okay, but if you fall asleep at 10 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The sleep math. Like, oh, well, 6.5 hours is still pretty good. I mean, that's almost 7 hours of sleep. That's good. Well, 6 hours, you've gotten 6 hours before. You've survived on 6 hours.
I do the same thing.
you talked about, I guess, so you talked about getting your book published. So we have no idea really how publishing works. How was the querying process? And like you talked about getting YA, and then now again with the romance, was it two separate? I mean, we know nothing. So if you want to tell us how your process was, sorry, I'm awkward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, oh God, since I have been in this for so long, it's like kind of a very long journey, and querying has changed a lot. So it's changed a lot even in the time that I've been doing it. So when I first started, I was, like in high school, in college, when I got the YA published, I was like just out of college. And in that era, like I did email queries, but like actually I was just going through papers the other day and I found all these papers that were like all these form rejections that I got by mail. Like I mailed away my query, and then I sent a self-addressed stamped envelope, and then they sent me back their form rejection. So I mean, like, that's kind of how it used to be. And then when I got my first agent back with the YA, I did email her, so it wasn't snail mail or anything like that. But I remember how I found agents in that era was I would look through, like, they had these, and they still have them. They have these like publishers marketplace like books, these like writers, guide to whatever literary agents books, and like it's like a telephone book. You just go through it and you flip through. And now they have like sites like Query Tracker, for example, which will tell you all that information in a much more updated and like easy to navigate way. But I remember back when I was in like high school and college, I used to get those books for Christmas. Like I would ask for them for Christmas. I'd be like, I really want 2009 Guide to Literary Agents or whatever. And then the other thing that I did, which again, you can still do, is I would look through the author's like acknowledgments in their books to see who they thanked. So like, for example, I was a really big Meg Cabot fan. I loved like the Princess Diaries and stuff. And so I looked in her acknowledgments and I saw, her agent's name, because she thanks, every author pretty much will thank their agent in their acknowledgments. And so I actually queried her, and she rejected me at first, or no, she said, go ahead and send me like a partial, like a little bit, like 5 pages or something of your book. And I did. And then she rejected it. And then and looking back on it, I don't know why I had the chutzpah to do this, honestly, because like, even now, I don't think I would do this, but I was like 22 or something. I don't know. I was like, whatever. What do I have to lose? Emailed her back and I was like, I know the book starts a little slow. but I really think you'd like it. Can I just send you like 50 pages?" And to her credit, she was like, "Sure, yeah, okay, send me 50 pages," which she did not have to do. She could have just been like, "No, no is a complete sentence. I already told you I don't want your manuscript." And then she read it, and then she, asked me for more of it, and she read the full thing, and then she ended up, again, a sign of the time. She called me, and she like left a voicemail on my answering machine, that I don't have anymore because I don't even know, where that like micro cassette would be. So that was like back in, 2006, 2007 was like when that all happened. And then, she was my agent for many years and we kind of, had our whole journey together. And then this is not an uncommon story in publishing. Most authors I know are on their second agent, third agent, fourth agent, just for various reasons. Sometimes your agent leaves the industry. Sometimes they stop repping the kind of books that you want to write. Sometimes you start wanting to write a different kind of book that they don't really, they're not following you there. Sometimes there's just something about their style that like it turns out isn't a match for you. And you don't necessarily know that when you sign with them. So after I parted ways with that agent, I went back in the query trenches. And that's when I was like going on Query Tracker all the time, looking at the different agents and who was open and what were they accepting. And I sent out so many queries. I had whole spreadsheets where I kept track of like, what they would say. And one big thing that I would do is I always like to, I called it rage querying. I wasn't like really like raging, but the idea is if you get a rejection, then you immediately send another query. Like you basically go to your spreadsheet and you find like the next name in your list and you send it right away. So you take all that energy from that, "Oh man, like I feel really bummed that that person rejected me," and you just immediately turn it around to send out, another one. And I would play little games with myself. Like on Query Tracker, they would say like the average time for this agent to respond is 47 days. And so I'd like make little bets with myself. Like, okay, I think I'm going to get a response to this query by this date. And if I do, then I get like a little treat. And if I don't, then whatever. I don't know. I would just try to find ways to make it fun because honestly, querying can be it's just really demoralizing. It's like all you're getting is rejections. If you get responses at all, a lot of agents just don't respond at all. So I did that for many years. I queried a YA novel that got like really close a couple times, but never really went anywhere. I queried another YA novel. I queried a romance. I mean, I was hustling. I was out there. And then I entered this pitch wars contest where you enter your manuscript and you try to get like a published author to mentor you. And that was Love in the Time of Serial Killers. So I wrote that book. I wrote it in a really short span of time, like a couple months, because I was trying to hit that publishers or pitch wars deadline. And I remember actually, technically, you're not supposed to submit if you don't have a full manuscript, but I hadn't written all of it. Like technically I had like the epilogue and stuff. I was still working on it and I went ahead and submitted. So I was kind of like on the one hand, really praying that somebody would want it. And then on the other hand, a little bit like, but don't want it too quickly. Like I want you to want it, but in like a week so that I have time to finish it. And then several authors did request it. And I was, very gratified by that. But they all, when it came time to announce like the winners, I wasn't selected. And at first I was really bummed because I was just looking forward to maybe like working with a writer on this book. And I was feeling very lonely in my publishing career. Like I just felt like I didn't have an agent anymore. I didn't have a lot of like writing friends or people who are kind of keeping me, could beta read my work for me or cheer me on or whatever. So I really wanted that like relationship. And several of the authors were very kind and they reached out to me afterward and they basically said, we kind of think this book is ready. You should just send it. And so several of them connected me with their agents, including Rachel and Solomon was one of them. And she connected me with her agent. And then that's how I ended up getting the agent for Love in the Time of Serial Killers, was through that.
That's really
I feel
cool.
like writing is such a solitary activity, and I feel like it is hard to make those author friends to be able to share that work because again, it's so vulnerable, especially like your first couple drafts. So I feel like it is really important, and I feel like now you're with like Berkeley, which is like the best romance novels come out at Berkeley. So I feel like you hit the jackpot there.
Yeah, but you're right. It is really lonely, and something about it too is I think that people don't realize is it can be lonely at any stage. Like you can be very successful and still kind of feel that way just because you don't have maybe like anybody who you feel like is in your corner, or you can have, publication credits to your name, but you have a really like robust writing community and you actually feel like I've got all these people in my corner, all these people who are, so that's the other thing is like, I think people sometimes think that it goes hand in hand with like how successful you are or where you're at in your journey. And it doesn't, it's a kind of a separate thing.
Yeah. Bringing it back to in every possible way, I did want to ask you, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what you're talking about. Kind of one, what was the spark for this? Like where did the idea come from? What made you excited to write it? But also kind of what the process is when you have an idea do you need to like first get it approved by your agent before you just hit the keys? Or is it like you get something out, send it to your agent and your agent's like, yes, I love it. Or they're like, no, Alicia, we're not doing that. Try again. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, the first spark for the idea was I don't even fully know, to be honest, because it's kind of so weird that I wish I could like tell you that I had this one very specific moment, but I already mentioned Before Sunrise, but I just love that movie. And so I've always wanted to write something kind of like that, where it's like it takes place in a very short span of time and it's just like two people walking and talking. Like one thing I realized after writing this book, that is actually very difficult to write. And not to take away from the movie, which is great, but I almost think it's harder to write as a book than it is as a movie because you don't have any of the visual stuff. You don't have the soundtrack and the micro expressions on their faces and all this stuff that kind of the movie can do to sell you on the relationship and the journey that they go on. So it was very challenging to write in that way. And then I don't know, I had never been to Ireland, as I already told you, but I've always just been fascinated by it and, love stories set there and stuff. So I just thought it'd be cool to have it set in a different place like that. And then as far as getting your ideas approved, it really varies by author and even by agent, by editor. I mean, I can tell you that I've sent an email with like a single sentence and had that book approved by my editor. And basically it's like, we just went straight to, I want to write a baseball romance or whatever it is. And it was like, okay, go for it. And then I've also had where I've submitted, like I've written sample chapters, I've written a synopsis. I've like kind of had a whole package of like, this is the idea that I'm, thinking about. And it varies a lot based on writer, based on like, how do you like to do things? Some people don't like to pitch based off of like a single sentence, for example. They might want to have sample chapters before they even pitch an idea. And editors and agents have different requirements too for like what they're looking for. So it really varies. But for this particular book, I mean, yeah, I basically had a phone call with my agent where she was a little bit like, okay. I mean, she was a little bit like, that's a little strange, but all right. Yeah, we can, sure. We can try that. And then I can't remember all what I sent to my editor. I think a synopsis. I can't remember if I had sample pages yet or not, but I definitely had a synopsis that I wrote up. And she came back with a couple questions, just like, these are a couple things I'm wondering about it. And then after that was like, okay, sure, go for it. You kind of never know.
I've always wondered about that. Like, if you send off an idea you're super excited about and they're like, yeah, and you're like, but wait, it's really good. Like, work with me here.
I know. Well, one way that I'll tell you that authors are very different right away is that like some authors are really good at pitching and they like that part of the process. And so they will come up with like, a page of just nothing but like log lines and different ideas. And, yeah, some of them they're really good at that. I don't particularly like to pitch. Like I'd almost rather write the fucking book than pitch it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Just let me write 100,000 words rather than try to get like a single pithy sentence that tells you why you should be excited about this book. And the other thing for me is I usually, like I said, because in my ideal world, I think about a book for a very long time before I write it. A lot of times when it comes time to suggest an idea, I really only have one that I'm really excited about. So I also don't want to pitch like 3 different ideas because I don't want you to pick the other 2.
Right.
I kind of know the one I want to write. And I worry that like this other one sounds really good to you, or it just so happens that you're really looking for a horse romance. And I'm like, and then I don't know, as a third idea, I don't know, she's on a ranch or something. And you're like, oh my God, yes, that's exactly what we want. And now I'm the one who's stuck writing this horse romance that I like did not particularly want to write. It was just like this like loose idea that I kind of, vaguely had. So I personally prefer not to pitch more than one thing at a time if I can help it, because that's kind of what I really want to do.
Makes sense.
If you could have like a dream, if this was turned into a movie in every possible way, who would your dream cast be?
Honestly, I know it's such a cop out. I always feel like I can't really answer that question because I don't know. I don't have people in mind a lot of times. And I also know that people have such strong feelings about it that sometimes I'm almost hesitant to like put anybody's face in your mind. Yeah.
That makes sense. Do you hope your books will turn into movies, or are any of them on the way?
I mean, sure. It would always be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of nerve-wracking, the idea of it though.
Very nerve-wracking because it depends on how involved you get to be with it, whether you have any control or not. And I'm like, as someone who, not that I've written a book, so this is just if I wrote a book, I feel like I'd be very protective of it. Like, it's my baby. Why are you changing this? And why are you doing that? And maybe like I wouldn't like the final product. So I've heard a lot of authors just say, look, if it's going to be turned into a movie, that's their craft. I'm going to hand it over to the experts and I just have to step back and let it be what it'll be. Do you feel like you'd be one way or the other?
Yeah, it's so hard to say that because it's kind of like I think a lot of it is like obviously trusting whoever the people are that you're working with because there are some filmmakers obviously that I mean I love their work so much that if they were like I want to take your book and do something with it, I'd be like have fun, like have at it. I can't wait to see your interpretation. I can't wait to see what you do with it. It's probably going to be better in the book if we're being honest. Like I'm really excited about it, you know? And then there are others or just, you know, people you don't know where you're a little bit like, oh, what's this going to be like? And Hollywood, it's so funny because it's such a different process from writing a book because it's so collaborative. You know, there's so many people working on it. And in a way, I think that that's really cool and something that as an author, you don't get to experience that the same way. You don't really get to like work with other people on your book quite the same way. Like you have your editor and you have like, you work with people, but it's different. Like the story itself is really yours. But then obviously the flip side is it's really yours. So you get to call all the shots. It's interesting, the difference between those two things.
So thank you so much for joining us. So before we sign off for the day, can you remind the audience when your newest novel coming out in Every Possible Way goes on sale and where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, In Every Possible Way it goes on sale June 23rd. And you can find me on social media on Instagram at Alicia Books. I also have a newsletter that's aliciabooks.substack.com. I'm going on a very small tour for this one, but I'm going to my launch event is in St. Pete, and then I do events in Austin, Dallas, and Orlando. So if you're in any of those cities, yeah, you could come see me.
Well, congratulations on all your books, but specifically In Every Possible Way, since this is the one coming out. We read it. It was so cute. Jess and Eamon are definitely, there's a bit of luck there, but maybe just a bit of hard work on their part as well. And really liked it. I was going to say too, if you ever get that idea for human to dog, dog to human book, you feel free to send that our way. We'd love to read it, get an early copy of that, and maybe, you know, give you some feedback.
I was on the ground floor of the shapeshifter romance, I think, you know?
I really think you had something there.
There was that whole series. I think it was like the Metamorphoses collection.
Yeah.
I do remember those from a young age. They had a very strange cover, but I think they were a hit too. I think you got something there.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for taking your time and talking with us. We really appreciate it. It was so great meeting you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Best of luck when it comes out, and we will be hyping it up.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.